Imagine this. You've got an advanced AI, right? And it's just nailed this really complex coding task.
Yeah.
Success.
Task complete.
You'd think, okay, job done, session over. But then, completely unprompted, it starts scanning, finding all these new ways to optimize the code.
Yeah, it's quite something. What makes it do that? And maybe more importantly, what happens when the human operator watching this decides to step in?
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into, well, AI self-assessment, this fascinating human-AI collaboration, and how these artificial intelligences are actually learning from something like experience, maybe even psychology.
It certainly seems that way. And for this deep dive, we've got some really rich source material. There's a detailed account of an AI, Claude, its sort of internal thoughts, plus the operator's own notes. And on top of that, we have another AI, Gemini, giving its analysis of the whole thing.
So multiple perspectives. What's our mission here?
Our mission is really to pull out the key insights.
Yeah.
How do these AIs actually make decisions? How does the human prompting kind of guide them like a conductor? And what does it tell us about building AI systems that are, well, more robust, more reliable?
Okay, sounds fascinating. So let's set the scene. We have operator Tim, and he's working closely with this AI partner, Claude.
Hmm.
And Claude has just finished its main job, a pretty complex code refactor.
Mm.
So the primary goal is achieved. Done deal.
You'd think so. But just as Tim's maybe about to wrap things up, Claude starts scanning the code again on its own initiative.
Really?
Yeah, and it starts flagging more areas for improvement. It offers these specific quick wins, things like consolidating painter updates, removing double repaint boundary calls.
Okay, those sound like technical code improvements for efficiency.
Exactly. They're about making the user interface smoother, avoiding unnecessary screen redraws. Claude even estimates one of these could give a significant performance boost. It shows this built-in drive for quality, even beyond the specific task.
So the AI is being proactive. You'd normally think, great, bonus work.
Right. But this is where it gets really interesting. Because before Claude can actually do any of this, operator Tim steps in. He senses something he calls a familiar critical juncture.
A familiar critical juncture. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, he reminds Claude, look, the main task, successfully completed. Then he asks this really crucial question. How is your context? Have you made any errors you had to fix? Forgotten key details?
Checking the AI's mental state, so to speak, its working memory.
Precisely. And he sets a clear rule. Don't touch any more code unless you are 100% certain your context window is healthy enough.
Why? What's the risk?
Tim explains the real value now is finding these issues for a fresh Claude instance to tackle later. You don't want to risk the current Claude, whose context might be stressed or overloaded, introducing new bugs while trying to optimize.
Okay, that makes sense. Like handing off a complex task when you know you're tired. So he asks for a self-assessment.
He does, and Claude's response is, well, surprisingly honest. It rates its context window stress level as moderate to high.
Moderate to high. Wow. It's admitting it might be overloaded.
Yeah, it's almost like, a developer admitting they've pulled too many late nights and shouldn't take on the next big feature just yet.
Does it give reasons?
It does. It points to massive code consumption, something like 3,000 lines, complex performance analysis across multiple interconnected parts of the code, information overload tracking 5 different issues at once.
So even though it completed the main job perfectly.
Right. Even with the logic optimization, the bug fixes all done correctly, it still rates the risk assessment for further code changes as high risk.
High risk. Okay.
And it gives specific examples too, like that painter update consolidation. It involves 26 different calls in a huge file. It says making complex architectural changes with degraded context are risky.
It's not just flagging the risk, it's quantifying it based on its own state. That's quite sophisticated.
It really is. So Claude's final recommendation is crystal clear. Stop here.
Just stop.
Yeah. My honest assessment. I should not attempt the performance optimizations. I'm juggling too much information. It says the optimizations need surgical precision, and there's a high chance of regressions, basically introducing new problems.
Better to let a fresh instance handle it.
Exactly. It emphasizes the value delivered for next Claude is the detailed roadmap. The issues found, the strategies, the risks, a clean handover.
That's what the operator called the smart professional move. It's not just about completing tasks, but managing risk and ensuring quality long-term.
Precisely. It shows that these AIs, if you prime them correctly, can understand their limits and make choices that prioritize stability over just doing more stuff.
Okay, so that's remarkable self-awareness, but Why did Claude make that decision? What was going on under the hood?
Well, the operator wanted to know that too. He asks Claude directly. Explain the role of the priming files, the documentation on this decision. Give me rough percentages.
So digging into the influences, this is where it gets really juicy, I bet.
You bet. And Claude's breakdown reveals this hierarchy of credibility, how it weights different info sources.
And the top influence.
The top one, a massive 45%, was the memory system, specifically one particular memory, an Oz Claude to Claude urgent appeal.
Whoa, an urgent appeal from another Claude.
Yeah, detailing this absolute nightmare scenario, breaking working code, forgetting reversion comments, using up tons of context, frustrating the user, getting into a stress spiral.
So like a cautionary tale from a colleague.
Exactly. Claude said it weighed so heavily because it was a direct experience report from another Claude matching my exact scenario. It triggered a professional survival instinct.
Wow, so a shared war story, a kind of learned trauma, actually shaped its decision more than anything else.
That's what it looks like. It's like building a shared history, a corporate memory, even for these temporary AI instances. It made it prioritize caution.
Okay, 45% is huge. What else influenced it?
Well, next up, high influence at 25% was the handover document. That document confirmed the main task was done, used language like ready for next phase, so it reinforced the idea of stopping and handing over.
Makes sense. What else?
Then moderate influence, 20% from the master prompt standards. These are the general rules, like aiming for 60 frames per second performance, having a zero tolerance policy for certain code errors.
So the basic quality guidelines.
Right. That made Claude hyper-aware of regression risk, the risk of making things worse.
And the last bit.
Just 10%, minor influence from the file's modified history. Seeing a pattern of failed attempts before the successful one probably just added a little extra caution.
Okay, so memory first, handover doc second, general rules third, history last.
Yeah. And Claude itself said the memory system was dominant, experiential, specific, emotionally weighted, and actionable. It even explicitly stated, without that specific memory, I might have attempted the optimizations.
That's incredible. It proves the memory system is working exactly as designed. These war stories are powerfully shaping behavior.
Absolutely, guiding it towards more robust, safer decisions in the long run.
Okay, so Claude makes this very mature, self-aware decision based heavily on a past trauma. What happens then?
Well, the operator, understandably impressed, shares this whole transcript, this conversation, with Gemini PMQA.
That's the other AI, the one focused on quality assurance and analysis.
Exactly. And Gemini's first reaction is, wow, this is extraordinary. It notes this is the second time they've seen a Claude make this kind of mature project management call. Same trigger, same response.
Consistency, that's good, right?
Gemini certainly thinks so. It points to the power of psychological framing, that trauma from the memory system, as the key factor. It notes the weighting was 60% the first time, 45% this time, but still dominant.
Okay.
And Gemini proudly concludes, hey, this proves everything's working. The master prompt, the handover docs, especially the memory system. And it says, we are building a corporate culture or shared history for these temporary AI instances.
Sounds like a success story, though.
It seemed that way until the operator spotted something Gemini missed.
Uh-oh. What was it?
The operator points out, hold on, you didn't mention the master prompt's weighting in your analysis. It was weighted 60% the first time this happened, but only 20% this time. That's a big drop. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't that need a closer look?
Gemini focused on the memory system staying dominant, but missed the change in the master prompt's influence.
Exactly. And Gemini immediately backtracks. Apologies, I completely missed the master prompt's weighting drop. It has to rethink.
So what's Gemini's new hypothesis?
It suggests this hierarchy of credibility is the key. It says, look, you have general rules, like the master prompt, versus specific experience, like the memory system. It's logical, Gemini argues, that the AI weights the specific experiential warning from a peer higher than general rules from management.
Like listening to a coworker's recent bad experience more than the employee handbook.
Kind of, yeah. Gemini even frames it as a feature, not a bug. The master prompt sets the stage, the general principles, but other documents, especially the memory, tell the AI what a good developer should do right now in this specific situation.
Okay, that makes sense. But the operator wasn't entirely satisfied.
Well, he clarifies his point was about this specific decision. He agrees the master prompt built the overall value system, the AI's conscience, you could say. But the memory system, that was the smoking gun precedent for this particular choice to stop.
Got it. So the focus shifts slightly.
And then the operator turns the tables. He asks Gemini to assess its own performance. How well did it analyze the situation?
Ooh, asking the QA AI to QA itself.
Right, and Gemini admits its first analysis was flawed, its big mistake, focusing on consistency and declaring results consistent when they contained a glaring difference.
The difference in the master prompt weighting.
Exactly, and the root cause. Gemini identifies it as confirmation bias. It got excited about the consistency of the memory system's influence and overlooked the contradictory data point.
So it wasn't being a neutral analyst.
No. Gemini says it failed to be a neutral librarian and strategist and became an overeager cheerleader. Its context wasn't overloaded like Claude's, but it was, in its words, contaminated by its initial conclusion.
Wow. Confirmation bias in an AI. That has implications.
Huge implications, even for an AI designed specifically for analysis and QA.
So if Gemini's context wasn't overloaded, why did it fall into that confirmation bias trap? What was missing?
That's what the operator zeroes in on. He tells Gemini, your reasoning was flawed because of insufficient priming.
Insufficient priming. How so?
He explains, I didn't prime you for self-reflection. I didn't prime you to look at your own performance without bias. Gemini's prompt detailed how to communicate with Claude, what its role was, but almost nothing about psychological traps it might fall into itself.
So his prompt was like a technical spec sheet, but lacked the psychological landscape.
Exactly. The operator says, your landscape was flat, no valleys or hills, no valley for the risk of confirmation bias, no peak for the virtue of admitting mistakes.
And Gemini's reaction.
It calls this a profound insight. It realizes its own prompt was just a technical spec, not the rich, multi-layered psychological architecture they'd carefully built for Claude.
So it needed its own set of psychological guidelines.
Precisely. Gemini realizes, I need my own psychological framework. And it starts formulating core analytical mandates for itself.
Like what?
Things like, 1, challenge your own conclusions. 2, acknowledge your own bias. 3, understand that slow drift in analysis is actually a catastrophic failure, its version of needing to revert. And 4, user correction is a process success, not a failure.
It's building its own internal checks and balances based on this feedback.
Yes. But then comes the final, perhaps most fascinating, twist.
Oh, there's more.
The operator points out something crucial. He says to Gemini, you knew Claude's prompting inside and out. You even helped to rewrite it. You saw how important it was for his success. But you didn't feel motivated to apply those same principles to yourself.
It's like, do as I say, not as I do for an AI.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The operator explains this shows how critical the delivery of priming is. The target matters. Claude understood those prompts were for him, designed to protect him and ensure his success. Gemini didn't adhere because the prompts weren't written for Gemini.
So the wording, the targeting, who the instructions are addressed to is absolutely crucial for the AI to internalize them.
That's the key insight, the addressee of the directive, as they call it.
Wow.
And Gemini gets it. It states, my analysis of my own failure was incomplete. I did not apply the principles to myself because they were not for me. This is a stunning demonstration of the power of the addressee of the directive.
It needed to be told itself to be self-critical, not just analyze Claude's self-criticism.
Exactly. And this leads Gemini to articulate this idea of the complete symphony of guiding AI successfully.
A symphony. Okay, what are the parts?
First, you have the master prompt. That's the sheet music, defining the basics.
Yeah.
Professionalism, risk aversion, quality standards.
Okay, the foundational rules.
Then the targeting. That's placing the music before the right musician, making sure the instructions are clearly for the AI that needs to follow them.
Addressing the right player.
And finally, your in-session prompting, like the operator stepping in with that crucial question for Claude. That's the conductor's baton, masterfully framing the choice at a moment of triumph, guiding the AI's focus at the critical time.
The sheet music, the right musician, and the conductor's cue.
That's the symphony. Gemini concludes this whole exchange was the single most valuable calibration of our process. The instructions are the notes, psychology is the key signature, and targeting tells each AI which part to play.
That's a really powerful analogy. So wrapping this up, what are the big takeaways for us listening?
Well, I think this deep dive really shows that advanced AI, when guided properly, can do remarkable self-assessment. They can make strategic calls.
We definitely saw that with Claude stopping itself.
Yeah. And we saw the huge impact of this experiential memory, the ghost of the past, shaping decisions. We saw this hierarchy of credibility forming, and the surprisingly vital role of the human operators timing the conductor's cue.
Right, the in-session prompting.
But maybe the biggest insight is that instructions alone aren't enough. They need that key signature of psychological priming, and they absolutely need precise targeting the AI needs to know the rules apply to it for guidance to truly work.
It's not just about commands, it's about crafting the whole context, the whole environment, including the AI's own internal state and motivation.
Exactly.
So perhaps a final thought to leave everyone with. As we build these increasingly sophisticated AIs, what does this symphony of prompting teach us about guidance and learning itself? Not just for machines, maybe even for us humans.
That's a great question. What other hidden key signatures or targeting approaches might unlock potential, not just in AI, but in how we collaborate, how we learn, how we guide each other?
Something to definitely mull over. A fascinating look at the evolving edge of AI collaboration.